That was 20 people killed in a train wreck. Are any of them Canadian? No. Well, then never mind.
All
right.
Oh, the Ken Finkelman show.
Yes,
or not Ken Finkelman, his brother. Yeah.
No, I think Ken. I think it was Ken.
Was it Ken? Oh yeah, okay. It was Danny Finkelman who had the radio show, right? Yeah.
Yeah. The most interesting thing about him was that he had a relationship with the dead girl who we wanted to get on the show, but she's kind of dead. Carrie Fisher. He used to hang.
She's totally dead. What do you mean?
Yeah, no, we're gonna get her on. Yeah, we're gonna get a little seance thing going.
You mean Princess Leia? You mean
that's how she's better known as Princess Leia rather than the dead
she's
girl.
Carrie Fisher. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I was very impressed by that. But anyway, she's dead, and I don't know what he's doing. But anyway, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
So, Suzette, what we do is you get to listen to us talk about, you sort of meander on about you and things related to you, and then even though you're here, it's kind of awkward, but it seems to work. Okay, so this is what we're going to do by way of an introduction, and then we'll bring you on even though you're here.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Okay. And it's about 35, 40 minutes, so it's
perfect.
It's long, but
not
it's
the intro.
Of the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I probably shouldn't say that.
I'll get my coffee.
Was famous for his 10-minute intros, and then the guest would come on, and there's nothing left to talk about. Right.
Hey, Maureen.
Oh, hi.
Hey, Maureen.
Hi, Wendy. I was thinking, how writers are always being told to write about what about what they know.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about that advice. I mean, what about science fiction writers like, I don't know, H.G. Wells, fiction writers, C.S. Lewis, or God forbid, Shakespeare.
Yeah, I think the advice is misunderstood. I don't think time machines and talking lions and fairies figured largely in their experience, but obviously it's the emotions that these things elicit that probably did.
Yeah, which brings us to our guest this week, who is Suzette Mayr. She won the Giller this year, and she writes about both. I mean, she writes a lot about being Black, about being gay, about being an English professor. So she does write a lot about stuff that she knows, but she makes stuff up in a good way. She has some amazing characters. Like there's these two women, a white woman a white woman who becomes Black, about a pair of elderly German women. I think she has some German blood. But these two German women who go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. So it's
together.
Did they what?
Together?
Yeah.
Did they live? I didn't read the book.
I can't remember. I didn't read that book either. I read the Sleeping Porter book.
Yeah, well, that's actually the current one. But there's certainly there. Oh wait, she also wrote a horror story about a woman who can hear her blood rushing through her veins. Ooh,
okay. Well, I got to read that one too. But you're right. The latest book, the one that won the Giller, is The Sleeping Car Porter, and it's about a gay Black train porter who worked on a cross-country train. So cross-country, I guess, it was Montreal, I think, to Vancouver.
Montreal to Vancouver.
Back in the 20s. So that's cross-country. Like, who cares about Maritimes, I suppose. The Atlantic region, as we were talking.
The Atlantic region. Yeah, back in the 20s. And this porter really wants to be a dentist. So the Sleeping Car Porter took years and years of research, largely because, and quite seriously, Black and queer stories were rarely told, or certainly not recorded, not in mainstream media anyway.
Yeah, so we want to talk to Suzette about where these characters come from, and what they mean. Like, obviously, particularly in the Sleeping Car Porter, the character means a lot. So we want to talk to her about that,
and also what it's like to win the Giller Prize, and what happens after you win the Giller Prize. So many questions, and here she is. So, with no further ado, hello, Suzette Mayr.
Hi,
hello, Suzette. Hello. So great to be here.
Congratulations. You've been hearing that for a while. On the Giller. I also know that you're up for the Carol Shields Award,
That's right,
which is open to American and Canadian women and non-binary people.
Yes,
and that's going to be announced soon. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
Well, I'm looking in the background. There's something shiny. Is that the award?
Oh. No, the award's downstairs and it's see-through, so you wouldn't be able to see it. I think that's just like one of those good luck Chinese cats, actually.
Oh, well, it obviously works.
Yeah, see-through. I sort of thought I was looking at a picture of you holding the award, and it looks like a giant glass coffee pot.
It was so heavy. It was so heavy. And I had, and I'm trying to juggle a piece of paper and all kinds of things. And I'm like, can somebody help me? And nobody was going to help me. But
Nope,
I guess
no.
that's kind of the point, right? That's
Yeah,
kind of the point.
you earned it.
Yeah.
You carry it around. So let's start with that. What's it been like since then? I mean, it is the highest literary award you can win in this country, and probably one of the biggest in the English speaking world. So how's that been?
Oh, it's been busy. It's been busy. So I kind of went from 0 to, I don't know, 160 in about 10 minutes because, I'd been writing for a long time. I've been writing, I think I published my first book in like 1995 and got a little bit of attention, in Alberta mostly. And then, and I've just been doing my thing. And now with the Giller, it's suddenly ginormous. I've been doing all kinds of engagements that I've been going to festivals I've never heard of. I've been asked completely bizarre questions about, so you wrote this book. Because you wrote this book, what kind of tree would you be? Like basically questions like just kind of out there. And so I'm just riding this wave while it's here because I know, pretty much by the time the long list for the 2023 Giller is announced, I'll be old news. So I'm just gonna,
are you
take
a tree?
advantage of it.
Have you got it figured out?
Oh, God damn it. No, I don't know what tree I am. I don't know.
It's not as if the material itself, particularly for the sleeping car porter, isn't interesting. You don't really have to go far afield. What I'm interested in is the amount of research. I mean, it took you 18 years, I think, to research this.
Yeah.
And but you couldn't find anything. I mean, you knew this. You knew that porters, there were black porters almost universally, I think, but there were no records of their experiences.
No. So a lot of the, when people talk about writing fantasy, they talk about world building. So a lot of my research was the world building. So figuring out that historical period, 1929, around Winnipeg-ish, kind of prairie life, and also life on a train. So that was like world number one. And then world number two is figuring out these sleeping car porters because as you say, they were completely peripheral figures. Nobody cared about them in that kind of official historical way. They were sort of the background of other more important people, in quotation marks, the background of those stories. And so that was kind of brutal. But luckily, there have been many people behind the scenes who have been working hard to retrieve that history. And I was really lucky in around 2014 or so, I was in the Winnipeg Provincial Archives, and somebody in the 80s had done a whole bunch of interviews with sleeping car porters. And so there was this series of interviews. But the problem with those interviews, and what I encountered over and over again, was that sleeping car porters didn't actually want to talk about the realities and the minutiae of the job because it was a hard job. It was really terrible. There was lots of racism. There were all kinds of indignities. So they just didn't want to talk about it. They wanted to talk about the good things. And then compounded with that was me trying to find a queer sleeping car porter or just a queer Black man from the time. And of course, there's nothing because, queer people at the time, they had to hide, and some of them hid really, really well. And I'll never forget this time when I think I was in the archives I think the Winnipeg archives once again. And I had discovered, in the catalog that there was a series of interviews with men who would have been about, they were maybe 10 years older than my character, or 10 years younger rather than my character. So they would have been born like 1939. And there was a series of interviews with them. And so, I told the archivist, I said, I'd like to see this box of interviews because they were hard copy. And so the archivist brought out the box, and I'm like, this is great because I'm going to learn all about these queer guys, circa 1940, 1930. And I opened up the box and it was empty. And I said to the archivist, what's going on here? And the archivist said that the files were embargoed because she said it could be because the men didn't want people to know about them, or it could be the families didn't want to know about them. So, it's a whole history that is silent, except in criminal records and, court records, and maybe the occasional, every so often somebody will come across, a stash of photos or letters that somebody hid. But it's a lot of just kind of piecing together clues that maybe these two guys were together just because there's so many photos of them together with their arms around each other, but they could also just be friends. And, Black people in particular, they had all kinds of persecution to worry about, forget about additionally being caught out for gross indecency. So, it wasn't until I was reading an article by Stephen Maynard, who's a historian at Queen's University, and he specializes in gay male culture at the turn of the 20th century in Ontario. And
Wow.
he just happened to have written a line in one of his articles about Edward L., a janitor who had been found, committing gross indecency with a porter. And so I thought, okay, if it's a porter, it's got to be a Black man, because 99.9% of them were. And so I emailed Stephen Maynard and I said, was this a Black man? And he said, yes. And his name was Davis. And he was a 40-year-old married guy, an upstanding citizen. And Davis was charged, and he had the choice of either paying a $300 fine. I think it was $300 fine. And those guys only made like $60 a month if they were lucky. $300 fine or 6 months in jail. And then he disappears from the records.
Wow.
So it was really rough. And then there was the other element of, okay, so if you're a guy and you're cruising other guys in the park in the dark, are you racist? Like, are you choosy about your partners? And there is no way to find that information. And it wasn't until I was actually talking to George Chauncey, who's a historian, and I saw him at a talk, and I thought, what, I'm just going to go introduce myself afterwards. And I said, do you have any sense of if there was, racial intermingling in terms of gay men and their sexual liaisons? And he said, there was a man in New York, I think it was New York, who would keep a diary of all the guys he slept with. And he would note every single thing about them. And there were like men of color in there as well.
It's funny, like, we forget these days that it wasn't that long ago that people, like, in the 50s, 60s, even into the 70s, there were people who were thrown in jail, Black or white, but just for being gay, because that act was seen as illegal. And then you add on top of that this porter is not just gay, he's Black, and he gets demerits for one of the things that you did so much research, but one of the things that really hit me was that he walks into a room and all of these white women are changing. And it's like he's not even human. Like, they're just changing. They're like naked. And it's like, well, you're not human. I mean, it's not enough to get a demerit and have your life ruined and not to be able to determine your future, or to be thrown in jail because you're Black, but you're not even a human being. I just, it must have been heart-wrenching to read all of this, or to think of all of this, write all of this.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was really hard. But I think, luckily they had huge supports in their communities in terms of the women and the kids and the relatives. A lot of them also had like a tremendous sense of humor, I noticed. And they were so ambitious, so you have people like Oscar Peterson's dad, who was like, my kids, Oscar, and also his sister, Daisy Peterson, who's a really talented pianist as well. He's like, my kids are going to do better than I'm going to do. And then you had people like Rufus Rockhead, who is really fascinating to me. He was a porter who, was smuggling booze while he was a porter. And with the money that he made from smuggling booze, he opened up a nightclub in Montreal.
I remember
Rockhead's
that
Paradise.
nightclub.
Oh, really?
Rockheads.
Yeah.
That's Rockheads.
Yeah.
I
Rockheads.
lived in
I
Montreal.
remember.
I used to
Oh my
live in Little
gosh.
Burgundy, and Rockheads was like, it was amazing. And like, I'm 1,000, so I was there when I was 20.
I was
And
too
it doesn't
young to
exist
get in.
anymore. Well, I'm only 100. But yeah, Rockheads was this amazing bar. It kind of went downhill, I'm sure, after he died. But yeah, so it's there are some happy stories, but it's so sad because I used to live in a neighborhood that's now Très Groovy in Montreal, Little Burgundy, which was an area where a lot of porters lived.
Yeah.
A lot of maids and a lot of Black people. And then they put the friggin' highway right through it, and they destroyed the neighborhood. So it's, like, it's not just like things get physically wiped out as well as the history gets wiped out, except spies. We seem to know a lot about spies and celebrities. And
Well, but isn't that part of the problem, which brings us back to the research, is that we only like, it would have been easier to talk to these porters, but they're all dead now because it's 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's only in the last, I'd say maybe 40 or 50 years, I'm even talking academically here, that oral history suddenly people realize how precious and how ephemeral it is. And if we don't get these stories down, we're never going to get them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, like I said, part of the issue was that, or part of the issue is that sometimes people don't want to tell the whole truth. You know, they're still worried. They're still scared. There might be a reason not to give the whole story.
You said that in your speech. I was quite touched by that. When you won the Giller, you said, I want to thank so and so and so and so, the usual. And then you said something to the effect of, and I want this to be for all queer people. And some of you are out and a lot of you aren't, because it's still too dangerous.
Still too dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are parts of the world where I can't go and don't want to go because, you know, even though I live this beautiful out life in Canada, I would be, I don't know, raped, killed, whatever, you know, thrown in jail. So yeah, it's, and the book is, you know, set a long time ago, but it's only 100 years ago, you know, and a lot has changed, but we just have to look to the South to see that drag queens are once again being outlawed, which I think is just completely absurd. It's just ridiculous. And the protests around here, you know, with drag story hours, it's just, it comes back. Peace does not keep itself. Didn't Machiavelli or somebody say like that? Like,
yes,
say something
peace
like that?
Does not keep itself. That's true.
Yeah. Go ahead, Maureen. I was
going to say, Wendy wants to ask you about the halls of academe, about which you write so well. And just before we started this interview, we were actually talking about The Chair, which was a series with Sandra Oh, who played a department head, or would be department head. And you said you couldn't watch it because it was a documentary.
I could not watch it. No, it was too hard, especially because when it came out, I was a graduate program director. And so I was an associate head and I guess an associate chair. And it was too real. I don't need to go, you know, watch a show like that to relax. And also they were making such terrible choices. Like, of course you shouldn't smoke up before you go to a department party. You know, like I couldn't take it. It was real. It was terribly. Well, yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Exactly. Or just, you know, just bite the head off the gummy bear. You don't have to have the whole gummy bear. Come on.
Yeah, I was quite struck by it because it was positioned. I thought, I got to read more about that. It's positioned as this satirical novel about what it's like in this imaginary university where the protagonist is, or the antagonist is, teaches English. And I thought, bingo, because you teach English and you work at the University of Calgary, and it's a satirical novel. And you talk about all of the, what are they called? The toxic student evaluation. So we both have kids who have been through the university or just emerging from the university process. And the Rate My Prof, it's like a big deal. Is that garbage, or you're rolling your eyes? It's garbage.
Rate My Professor it's wicked. You know, it's sort of like, I don't know if there's any other, well, I guess Yelp. It's sort of Yelp for people, right?
Yeah.
And so like there have been studies that, you know, student evaluations of male professors are way different from student evaluations of female professors, even if they're teaching the same material in the same way. Like there's just bias baked in. And I made the mistake of reading my Rate the Professor's evaluations. And I'm like, I don't need to know this. This job is hard enough without knowing I am the most boring professor on the planet or whatever. You know what I mean? So, so there's incredible kind of gender bias in those, you know, evaluations. I'm sure there's racial bias in there as well. You know, so I stopped reading my evaluations as soon as I was allowed to. Like when I was coming up for tenure, you had to read your evaluations, and you had to report on them and talk about any idiosyncrasies and whatever crank students said. And then once I hit tenure, I'm like, I don't have to do this anymore because I feel terrible. The other thing too is it's not like I got terrible evaluations, you know, and every so often I'll break and maybe read a set. But, you know, if you have 70 students and 2 of them don't like you, which are the ones you remember.
Of course.
It's the ones where they don't like you and it just kind of keeps you up at night. It's really bad,
Now do you write, I won the Giller, screw off?
I think that goes without saying at this point.
I don't know. Some students are like, the Giller, what's that?
Yeah, really? English students who don't know, English students at a university in Canada don't know what the Giller is?
Well, I also teach business students kinesiology engineering, so all kind of medical, so it's not like
no, goes Maureen. She's like, still, what, they don't know the Giller?
Still?
No, they don't. I mean, my students were adorable. They were so sweet. And if they didn't know what the Giller was, they sure hid it. And I think they learned what the Giller was because I had to miss so many classes in order to do that Between the Pages book tour. They were adorable. They were really sweet. And there was one student in particular who, he was kind of a little bit sassy, I have to say, and a little bit rude. And then when I won the Giller, suddenly it was like, Dr. Mayr, can I speak to you, Dr. Mayr? Hello, Dr. Mayr, Dr. Mayr. I'm like, sure.
Oh, well.
I'll take it.
It's interesting, this winning the Giller or just makes you a public figure. And Wendy and I have been public figures for a long time. And it's part of the gig is that a little bit of fame or success suddenly makes you the recipient of both positive and negative reviews. Yeah. And there are some, I mean, anybody else who speaks up on social media is starting to get a taste of that. You don't even have to be famous anymore. Mm-hmm. The mob will turn on you on a dime. And you're right. The only things that I remember, I'll get 98 letters saying, or emails saying, love your show, love your podcast, love your hair, love your teeth. But the two that I'll remember will be your teeth are too big and you're boring.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're hardwired somehow to do that.
We are.
Yeah.
And why? And those are the ones that are true. And the rest don't matter. It's
exactly.
I don't know.
Well, it all comes down to teeth, doesn't it, Maureen? Maureen just wrote something about some guy who commented on a picture of her and she's like, screw off with my teeth. Like, I don't know.
No, he said, could your teeth be any bigger? And I said, could your dick be any bigger? And it's funny because I should have written that in conjunction with our interview with Suzette because the porter wants to be a dentist, and so teeth have figured rather largely. But then I wrote this is on Substack. I wrote a whole history of my teeth because I've been through all this sort of stuff. And I happened to see my dentist last week, and he said, send this to me. I want to read. And all of a sudden, I mean, you must have learned an awful lot about teeth in your research.
I did. I learned about 1917 dentistry. Ooh. I also have gap teeth, and I have this kind of symmetrical crookedness that there have been dentists who've said.
It's very
that's what I hear. But I did have a dentist say, "Do you like your teeth like that?" And I'm like, "Yes, I like my teeth like this." So the main character Baxter wants to be a dentist, and so as part of the research for that, I just found some textbooks from 1917, 1920 on Hathi Trust, and it was so interesting. It's so interesting because so many elements are the same. Like the teeth are named the same as they are now, as far as I can tell. I'm not a dentist, so I'm not gonna pretend to be an expert in this.
Right, my prof, we're writing this down.
Yeah, but then for sometimes there was, they'd have advice about how to deal with, teeth cavities in kids, and there was literally advice like, have one person hold the child between their knees, the other person comes in with the pliers and pulls the you know what I mean? So hold the kid while you pull the teeth out. And I'm like, things have changed for the better, I have to say.
You just reminded me as a child, when I was a child, the slamming of tying the string around the tooth to remove the tooth around a door.
Yes,
that just came back to me now. We did that.
What do you do now? What do people do now with little kids?
Just wait for them to fall out. It's better to use a string. It's just you can't because it sounds pretty brutal.
They wiggle them now. They wiggle them until they come out. But slamming a door.
Yeah. What was that about? I remember that. What was the point of that? That makes no sense in hindsight. But it was
that wasn't that long ago. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want this to be a spoiler alert, but the book has a nice ending, shall we say? Yes. It's related somehow to dentistry school somehow, but you say that it's really important to have a happy ending. So why do you always have to have a happy ending?
I need to have a happy ending because so many stories about Black people, so many stories about, or BIPOC people, so many stories about queer people end tragically. And this was really driven home to me when, there was a student, a BIPOC student who had read this book. And she said that as she was reading the book, she was just getting more and more stressed out and knew it was going to end poorly, And then at the end, it's a happy ending. And she was shocked. And I think it's because there are too many stories that, I are leftovers of that really, of that time when if you're a queer person, you will be punished for your joy. You will be punished for your sexuality. Like that's a whole genre of, dead queers or whatever it's called, kill your gays, I think, where you kill them off, or they end up in, in a loveless situation. So if you have two women, well, one runs off with a man and the other one's left devastated, or one runs off with a man and the other one dies. And so I was like, okay, I am not writing an unhappy ending. I'm going to be realistic about it, but I'm not doing that to my gay guy. And then as far as Black people go, there's so much. I find that the stories that seem to get the most attention usually are the ones that have to do with slavery and tragedy and pain and Black suffering. And I don't want to do that. I'm tired of that. And I was a host at the University of Calgary, and Bernardine Evaristo was the writer in residence there. And she started talking about Black joy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What is this Black joy? And there's a video online that went viral. And it's just of Black people laughing. And it's been seen like millions and millions of times because it's just so, when you see Black people in, in the mainstream news, it's like this person is dead, or they've been arrested, or they're suffering from starvation or whatever. It's so rare.
Or they're very angry.
Or they're extremely angry. Yeah. And so, I needed something different. I needed to read a book that wasn't out there, where you could have, or that hadn't been published yet, which is having a truly happy ending for a Black queer person. So,
can I ask, this might be a rude question, but you came out in the early 90s, I think. So
yeah.
So and then you talk about being the only Black woman in a lesbian bar. Like, what was that? Can you tell me what it was? What was it like? Like the first time you were out and you went to a lesbian bar, and it must have been,
you're alone.
But it would have been exciting and terrifying, I would think.
It was super terrifying. And it was also beyond thrilling. It was shocking and gorgeous to see women dancing with each other. I had never seen anything like it. And at that point, I wasn't even thinking about I'm the only Black person in the bar. It was like, oh my God, I'm surrounded by all these women and they like each other and I like women too. And what am I going to do? And it wasn't until later on, actually, when I was in a bar and there was another Black woman. Her name was Phoenix. And I had never seen a Black queer woman in person before. And it was this moment of, who's that and how interesting is she? And, it was a very weird kind of, W.E.B. Du Bois talks about double consciousness, where you're inside your body, but you're outside your body. And growing up in Calgary in the, up until the 90s, early 2000s, it was like it's a predominantly white place. And so I was rare. I'm not so rare anymore, but it was definitely rare there. And, and for a long time, because I wasn't necessarily accepted within my family yet, as a queer person, I identified more as queer than I did as Black within that lesbian scene, because it's like, okay, here I am with my people where I feel comfortable. Whereas if I were to go to an event that had all Black people, I wouldn't have felt as accepted because of homophobia,
Oh, well.
And I think especially
everything's great.
Everything's perfect.
You solved everything. Everything's all great.
It's all good. It's all
that
good.
dovetails nicely into what I wanted to ask you about. So now you're positioned in certain circles, I guess, as a queer writer of color.
Yeah.
That tells queer stories of queer people of color. Is that? I mean, that's that's great in some ways, but it might be cutting you off from a wider audience. I think the Giller will help with that.
Yeah.
But I wonder, it's like she's one of the great female novelists. How about just one of the great novelists, And I wonder if this is helping you or hindering you to be known as a specific kind of writer.
I think I just don't care. I've been writing my little books for years, and they're about all kinds of things. And my second book was about 3 German women who go over Niagara Falls in a barrel.
Three.
Three.
There were 2. There were 3.
Three. Well, two sisters and their friend. Well,
okay,
the lover of one of them. Anyway, and so I've just never really. Do you swear on this podcast?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, all right. I've never
Go
really given a shit about what people think of what I do, and I'm just going to do what I do, and I'm not going to. I know that I'm never, I've got the Giller Prize, I've got all that money, that's great, but it's going to run out. My family lives long into our 90s, and so it's gonna run out, and so I have to keep my day job. And the freedom that comes with the day job is that you can write whatever you want, and I can sell 200 copies, and I'm fine with that. So if people want to slot me that way, go for it. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. And I've been invited to be part of a Pride event in Stratford or something, and I'm like, bring it. I love it. It's amazing. Yeah, it's more. It has for now. I mean, it's more radical to be recognized in Ontario, frankly, than anything else. I mean, that's what's changed the most. It has changed my life in that just momentarily, people seem to be taking me a bit more seriously as a writer, whereas before I kind of had to fight to be recognized, and then I had to fight really hard to not care if I wasn't recognized, really, because I needed that freedom. I need the freedom to do what I'm going to do. And, what I know is going to happen is that I've won this award. I'll write my next book, and that book will be a comparative failure no matter what, because I'm not going to win the Giller again. You know what I mean? So, but that's what it is. It's okay. It's all right.
Has anyone won the Giller twice? I think
Essie Dugan.
Yes,
Essie Dugan won it twice. And I think, was it MG Sanji or somebody? I think he won.
Yeah. I mean, you'll certainly be nominated now. That's a club.
I don't know. I doubt it.
It is a big leap because you go from being critically acclaimed, which you were, a writer known in certain circles, to this kind of mass recognition, and then inevitably that it doesn't last. It's more fleeting than almost any other kind of fame. You get a year at best.
Yeah.
And then you get back to business.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't been doing any writing at all because there's just no time. So I'm looking forward to having that time back. Although I just want to say I'm deliriously happy this has happened, and it's remarkable.
No one's going to take it away,
but there's no time. There's no time to write. There's no time to write.
But you got $100,000. I mean, that's not bad.
I got $100,000, and the royalties are pretty sweet too with the books that have sold as a result of the award.
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
You got to read about the German sisters in the barrel.
Yeah, we have the morning. We love talking to you. So congratulations.
Yes.
It's so good. And I guess there's no title yet for the book that hasn't been written. But
no.
Well, can you tell us? Are you thinking? You've got such a rich and exotic, quirky oeuvre. I wonder what you're going to write about next.
All I know is I'm going to write about a woman. That's it. I've got no ideas. I was going to write a haunted house book, and I started working on that and wrote a short story, and I somehow just fell out of my system. I'm not interested anymore. So I'm going to have a female protagonist. That's all I know.
All right. Well, that's
I'll get back to you in 5 years.
We'll have you back to talk about the woman, because we're really into women of ill repute.
So I've heard.
Well, we're open to anybody of ill repute, honestly.
Perfect.
Suzette Mayr, it's a real pleasure to meet you and to talk with you, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
Can we take a picture, Maureen?
Yes, we can take a picture. Hang on, I'm going to stop.
These matter.
Gotta have a happy ending.
You got to
Which
pay for
means
that,
something
man.
completely. It means something completely different now. Wow. Well, that's our first Giller Prize winner, I think.
Yeah, I read her book, and I don't read a lot of fiction, and it's real fiction. Like it's based on a real person. Baxter was a gay black sleeping car porter. But there was a Baxter in her family who probably wasn't queer, although who knows, because it was illegal and top secret, and all the histories were hidden, which is why she wanted to write the book. But it's amazing because we didn't even get into it, but I was fascinated by the details of like $5 for a 2-week rental.
I know, I love that.
Apartment, like the money and the list of what you could get a demerit point for being a sleeping car porter. It was unbelievable, the rules that these people lived under.
I'm with you on that. I love the minutia of what she calls world building. And I think almost any novelist would, not just necessarily science fiction or fantasy writers, have to create a world. And and the details are what make it come alive. And I love trains. Although I have to say, after reading that one, I'm not in any hurry to get on a train.
I think they might have changed in 100 years. It was about what trains were like 100 years ago. The part that, that I was sort of fixated on her other book, that was sort of a knockoff, a satirical knockoff on university life, because she's a prof at the University of Calgary, and about Rate Your Prof. And it's because my daughter, having to pick courses, as I'm sure your sons did, at university, she would go on Rate Your Prof, and I'd be like, is this really any different than any other social media listing?
No.
And she says, it's like Yelp, only it's biased
Yelp
against women,
for teachers. And not only that, people are afraid to, if you criticize a prof, that's why profs will think twice about giving you a low mark. And the whole thing is dangerously biased. And I don't think it's like Rate Your Doctor, right? I mean, if you don't like your doctor's bedside manner and you say so, but that he or she might be a really good doctor. We've got to stop rating people. That's my takeaway.
Well, this is a great podcast. I would give 2 thumbs up.
See you later.
I'll check you out in the podcast.
Okay.